Hey there, Steve.
Hello again, Joe. Good
to be back. Snap. So today's subject, we're calling this one the first 30 days, and it's going to echo a bit, I guess, of things we've talked about in our previous conversations, but really focused on, when you immediately start, how to get your head around life in a new role, work in a new role, and what to think about when picking something up. You and I have both got quite a few experiences in that area over two very long careers. So I'm looking forward to hearing about some of the things that you've done. Again, things we've shared, so we'll probably be able to share some scars of and some learnings from that, but also things we've done separately.
Yeah, there's plenty being involved in. Like you say, there's the whole green field, going into joining a new organisation, being able to build things from the ground up. You think it would be nice and easy when you're not inheriting problems, but that's generally not the case. And then I think we've both got various examples of inheriting teams or working in places where processes and systems are already up and running, and you've got to go in there and it's your role to try and sort of unpick what the problems are, understand the landscape, and then try and make your mark.
Yeah, I know you've done that a couple of times in recent years, so I'm looking forward to hearing a bit about that as we chat. Of course, as we've got a nice little allegory to create an image for this. I was thinking about this as the image of a car mechanic, a vehicle mechanic, doing diagnostics and essential maintenance on a rally car as it's in the middle of a race, speeding along a forest track, taking near misses with trees, hidden dips, sharp turns, crazy crowds wanting to snap their photos, and you're trying to work out what's going on with the car. That's what it's like starting a new role, or can be what it's like starting a new role. Moreover, yeah, absolutely. And moreover, you pull up the bonnet on the engine, and you discover that what's underneath isn't an actual rally car engine, it's a family car engine. And it's really not fit for purpose. We've just been hiding it effectively with a nicely painted bonnet. And then you look below and you discover that the tyres are rather too bald, or they're not big enough for the task. And we're probably pushing the analogy pretty hard already. But that's, as always, that's my image, certainly, of what it's like going into business as usual. And it's certainly what it's felt like at various times. And then what you're expected to do sometimes is engage in the middle of that business as usual and work out how to keep the bonnet shut when the catch is gone. Can you put enough gaffer tape on to hold it down? And have you got to pour extra petrol into the tank? And all of that whilst driving along with a map that's good for A roads but no good for forest tracks, and so on. So that's the image I have in mind, really, of what we're talking about here, that in this first 30 days, trying to really understand the landscape.
Yeah. So just chaos. That's basically what it boils down to.
Yeah. How do you make sense of something chaos?
That's usually what happens, isn't it? You go through the interview process. The interviewers have got to kind of sell the organisation to you, and according to them, everything looks great. They're painting a really good picture. You kind of think, I'm going into something, I'll be able to, stamp my mark on it here and there. But then it's not until you actually get in, you think yourself, what the hell's going on? And it's, you can't see the wood for the trees initially. And then I guess that's the start of your first 30 days, trying to figure out what's going on and what, where you need to be what you need to be prioritizing after that 30 days.
Yeah, exactly. And as a master mechanic, what you really want is to get that car into the workshop, and you want to get some spotlights on it, and you want to be able to really understand the details of what's going on there. Are we pushing this allegory too hard?
No.
Surely not. Surely not.
So you've been watching it from the stands initially, and then you've seen it out and about, and now it's about getting it back into the workshop and what needs to be fixed first.
Exactly. So I think we'll probably try and tackle this conversation in two halves. And I think the first bit is to talk about what's going through in the mind of a CDO what we've done in our various circumstances, and then when we come back after the break, we'll talk more practically what some of those head level things mean in practical circumstances, practical terms, with some rules of thumbs and tips and tricks and practical steps that we've taken in our various roles. Um, so yeah, maybe we should kick off with trying to work out what you're actually doing when you enter into something and you find that your pulse rate is going through the ceiling all of a sudden when you look at what's going on. There's a bunch of things, aren't there, which as a CDO you're starting to think about. I think the first question is that one. What is going on? What the heck is happening?
And I think that starts with, so you're quite near the top of the ladder, aren't you? So, you need to build a relationship with the CEO, I think, initially. What goals have been set for the organization? What is it they're trying to do over the next 12 months, 3 years, 5 years? Because that's everything that you're going to find out about that's going on the ground is to try and reach those goals that have been set by the CEO. So I think really initially, what is the company trying to achieve? I think that's the first thing you got to find out. And then you start getting into the conversations with the people on the ground to find out what they're doing to try and achieve that end goal.
Yeah. I'm starting definitely with the question of where are the problems? I've been brought in, I've been recruited for this role because someone somewhere, probably as you say, the CEO perceives that there's some issues that need to be dealt with, and doesn't really know how to deal with them and needs some proper help.
Yeah,
Really
and
aware that they've got problems that need to do to be moved forward.
Yeah, I find that it's a bit of a therapy session for when you first join an organization. Yeah, I'll spend the first week just meeting with people, whether that's the heads of department, the exec team, the actual delivery teams as well. And if I sit down, especially with a delivery team's quite, typically they want to get things off their chest because they've been living usually with problems for months or even years. And you sit them down and say, okay, my role is, you kind of outline what you need to find out. And then you start quizzing them about how the work processes, blockers, the dependencies they have on other teams, what's being fed into the team, what sales are over promising. I find that people open up pretty quickly. And the problem you've then got is trying to distill that into something that you can then work with, trying to understand what the main priorities are, what you're going to have to tackle first. Because at first as well, you don't necessarily have all of the context, you don't have all of the history as well. So you don't understand what really is priority and what can wait till a bit later as well. So yeah, trying to distill that down into something that you can then sort of use as part of your 100-day plan or your 300-day plan. That's the first challenge for me.
Yeah, I think there's that bit, isn't there, as you're going around, as you said, talking to people, walking and talking and chatting to people, head of department, as well as I really like the way you said that, talking to people who are doing stuff on the ground. Maybe because they wouldn't be able to talk, they wouldn't feel confident talking via their line manager or head of department. But constantly in my head is always going, are they aware that that problem exists? Do they get it? Do they see that that's, or is it just become part of this is the ways that we do our work? This is
normalized,
just accustomed to it. Yeah, normalized. Exactly. Yeah. And if they are aware of it, are they aware that it needs tackling, that it's something that could be done differently? And if it could be done differently, then there's also the kind of, do they understand that it is an actual problem and that it's impeding something, is impeding performance or impeding outcomes or whatever?
This is where we'll come back to the big picture thing, isn't it? That sort of up and down the hill, like we've talked about in previous episodes, where you've got to start mapping out the landscape quite early on. And I think at first you start off almost with a blank piece of paper. That's what the landscape looks like. And then you gradually, you talk to the sales team, you talk to the legal and commercial teams, you talk to the delivery teams, and then you start to understand what each of those teams is doing, how the different teams interact with each other, and where the blockers and the challenges are between them. I've worked in places before where the sales team, the project management team, the delivery teams, legal teams, they all had different objectives and they were all pushing against each other. So you're always going to have problems. Sales are over promising on something, or
Mhm.
they're promising the client they're going to deliver something in half the time that would normally deliver it in. That lands with the delivery team. The delivery team straight away, we can't do this. But you've got an awful lot, as in somebody going into an organization, you've got an awful lot to unpick to try and sort of help, sort of smooth that whole process out.
In your experience, you were saying you worked in a place that it was like the sales over promising. How have you tackled that? How have you actually gone about? I mean, were you aware? Were you able to understand that they knew that that was a problem, sales over promising?
No, it was something which was learned over time, over 12, 18 months, I think, to really understand what the problem was.
Right.
But I think this is where, when you first go into a place, you're trying to understand what the business is, what the business is trying to achieve. I think as part of that, you need to understand what objectives the teams have been set as well, because that was
Right.
the problem. You've got one team which is trying to cut costs. You've got another team that wants the best customer experience. So that there's potentially an awful lot of waste or over promising over there, or you're setting expectations too high. That just doesn't work, because one team is trying to be very, very lean and the other is, they're at the other end of the spectrum. So yeah, understanding the different objectives and challenges that have been set for each of the teams.
To have a different metaphor, it's like having a three-legged stool where one leg is supposed to be growing and one leg is supposed to be getting shorter,
Yeah.
and it's only going to get unbalanced, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, a really interesting thing that trying to put your finger on what is the actual problem or where are the key problems. And I think you're probably right. There are circumstances where it's very hard to do that in the first 30 days to actually draw out what the key problem is. Maybe you can do that with a fresh pair of eyes. Yeah, maybe you can't. Maybe it's one of those things that takes, like you say, 12 to 18 months. But that's certainly what you're trying to do in those initial stages. I had I was just going to say, I had experience not too long ago of going into a business that was quite early in its lifetime. I was drawn in at the seed capital round. It was venture funded when they had a product they were building, but they had a need for a professional services unit, and that was my job, was to build a professional services unit to build the processes and practices and so on. But it wasn't completely greenfield. They were already up and running and they already had some clients. I arrived when there was this crazy, chaotic, really intense project going on. It wasn't completely chaotic, actually. That's overstating it. It was just really demanding project. One of those ones that was transformative. That kind of scale would have given them a national prominence potentially with the impact when the client launched. But the client was really demanding. They were very, very ambitious with a strictly limited budget and time scale, with a very defined set of features they wanted to have in there. So the constraints were really powerful. Normally, you try and flex one of those three. And arriving there in the middle of that business as usual and trying to do that, walk up the hill or have the car in the workshop or whatever image you want to take is so incredibly hard to do simultaneously, because you have got this day-to-day stuff to deal with. And it's quite hard when you've got things right in your face, as we talked about in previous episodes, when you're walking through, walking across the landscape and suddenly there's a canyon you've got to ford, it's come out of nowhere, and that sort of thing. It's really tough.
So how do you approach that then? You've got business as usual, and like you say, it's there's an awful lot going on. There's a lot of challenges being set by the client. You've also got a remit to go in there and build this new professional services unit, which you probably don't have the capacity to do both. So how do you, what are your initial steps, reactions?
So
think that through and create the capacity to be able to achieve what you need to achieve.
What I was able to do what I would like to do was what you described a few minutes ago, talking to the heads of department, talking to particular members of the team. I wasn't able to do that because this thing was so percussive, so intense. But what I was able to do is there was a couple of very senior members of the team who were part of the delivery of this because it was such a small stage. And I had like a half of my brain sat outside myself almost, kind of, observing what was going on as we were doing it and listening to the patterns of demands or challenges that my team members were having as they were trying to do this stuff for this client and thinking more about what's the challenge in that, what's the difficulty in that, what does this particular team need in order to be able to function at a high level, referencing our previous episode, I guess, there. And almost not quite making notes. I'm quite, cranial. I keep things in my head rather than write lists down. But essentially, writing a mental list of, these people need this, 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 and this, and this to be able to function properly. And in this project, what we've got is the opposite of that, or something driving at 90 degrees to that, and so they're not getting it. And so, how can I function as that? So I got like a close-up version, if you like, of what you were just saying there. With the woman who became VP of product in the team at the time. So I was really able to understand her and her view of where the product was going and how the product worked and that sort of thing. And so that was the only way I was able to do with it, really. And then once that project itself had quietened down, we got closer to delivery point, and it was more into the kind of testing phase. I had a bit of quiet time and was able to do a bit more of the standing on top of the hill stuff.
For me, it's a challenge you get in almost every organization that I've worked in, where you've got to try and find capacity from somewhere. I think only one organization I could think of was where we had a bench, and you might have 20, 30 people sitting on the bench, and you could utilize them to sort of build the tools, do the training in preparation for something. But other than that, that's it. I think that's one of my biggest challenges, I would say, of this role, just trying to find the capacity to then, you make a little bit of, you make some sort of small changes. You got that low hanging fruit, which I think you sometimes look for when you first, like in your first 30 days, because that's usually for me the catalyst to then start building a little bit of capacity. You get a little bit of momentum in terms of change, and then you kind of build on it from there. But big challenge.
Mm. One of the things that I was trying to do in that quieter time as well was observe the larger organization beyond the delivery teams. And so the next thing that's kind of in my mind generally at this stage in the first 30 days is who's making decisions? Where does that power reside or the authority reside? It was a really interesting startup business that was a product of someone's PhD work, or it was the outcome of someone's PhD work being turned into a product. The seed capital had come with two wealthy chaps who were putting a bunch of money as the seed round, and they took seats at the table, of course, as part of that. But it meant then that we had two of the three people running the business who were from a commercial angle, the CEO and the commercial director, both a very, very commercial focus, which, is maybe great, really good, having energetic commercial vision. But there was only one person thinking about technology, product, delivery. Everything to do with client delivery actually was in this third person's hands, partly why I was recruited. But it meant that the business felt overbalanced. I don't know why my hands are going towards the right, but for some reason towards the right was where the commercial team were. And there was a really heavy commercial focus, which was a lot about convincing clients to purchase the thing. And they had a particular commercial model to follow, all of which sounds really good. But I think with something that's VC funded, then there's potentially a different way of building it, because you're trying to build reputation around the capacity or capability of the product rather than prove that loads of people are using it. That can kind of come later.
Yeah, these things have got to be properly aligned. Otherwise, you've got competing objectives if you're just commercially focused or if you're product focused. If the commercials are not focused on the product that you've got that you're going to be then selling, you're making a road for even back there.
And what it meant for me trying to build the professional services unit, or the delivery unit, essentially, was that stuff became very secondary to commercial objectives, which was just all about, can we sign more people? Can we sign more people? How do we get more people signed on? Rather than how do we make this robust and comprehensive and capable for when we, at some point further down the line, when we get lots of people wanting to use it. First of all, let's get some really big names, get some really big brands behind it, and let's do them as yeah. Anyway, what I suppose I'm illustrating there, or wanting to point towards, is I was trying to evaluate, well, where does the power reside? Who's making decisions with this? Is it this set of people, or is it that set of people, or is it something else, something third? And that's definitely what I'm thinking about in that first 30 days. I think after that, the next thing is starting to become kind of microscopic, and you've probably been indicating this, and maybe you could talk some more about your own experiences here, but where you're actually starting to dig into the practices, the actual systems, like the platforms and toolkits that people are using, and the governance practices, and the actual delivery processes. I know, for example, that you were delivery lead in the UK part of a European business that was formed from several agencies joining together into a larger thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the UK unit became seen as a kind of centre of excellence. But I'm interested really about how you did that, how you became the UK team became seen as the experts when you had all these practices and systems in all the other different agencies that were joining together. How did you work through that?
No, that's a good question. I mean, we put ourselves forward as the sort of experts in doing this. We had experience. I mean, at the time, this was quite a few years ago, and Agile wasn't quite as well known, but it was quite well understood, but hadn't been implemented across the different country offices.
Right.
So if you've got all these other country offices, I think there might have been 7, 8 of them, all operating in their own way. There was no kind of joined up thinking. So what I done first was getting things right for the UK office to begin with. Get our team working well together. People were, doing Agile properly. We were Agile, if you like. And then it was about sort of, I would go out there and spend some time with the different offices, the different European offices, and understand their ways of working. And quite often, some of them were just sort of winging it, for want of a better word. People were managing to deliver, but there was no real way of doing it. And it was just about understanding, helping them understand what it was that they're trying to achieve. Trying to put in some processes around delivery so that we end up with something which is a bit more consistent. So you've got more or less one way of work, and you don't want to nail this down as a methodology. It's more about putting in a framework that people kind of work with. And then over time, just putting in that kind of a governance structure around everything that's being done. And then getting, quite regularly getting the delivery managers together on a call and just talking through experiences, what's working, what's not working. And the idea being, I suppose my success metric, if you like, was all of these companies came together to work under one umbrella. And the idea being that we could kind of scale up quite easily, quite quickly to meet the needs of a UK client, a big UK client. And you want consistency. So if we bring in somebody new from this country or that country office, you wouldn't really feel the hit because they'd be used to working in a certain way. They could just augment with the team, and all you're doing there is you're just kind of lifting the capacity, or you're replacing somebody if you need to. And there's no real sort of hit on the teams. There's no impact, if you like, other than just that extra capacity. So yeah, it took a little while to get it right. There was quite a bit of coaching involved as well, just to try and get people on sort of a similar standard. But that was just a case of, working with these people, providing them with a bit of... In some of the country offices, there was only, say, 1, 2 or 3 delivery managers, and they didn't always have people to kind of bounce things off, get some advice from, this has happened, what do you think I should do in this situation, so on. So it was about providing that bit of coaching, that bit of support. And obviously, if it's coming through me as well, it's easy for me to understand what we're trying to achieve. And eventually, yeah, we ended up with quite a good level of consistency across all those different offices, and a lot of feedback as well, which I think is always really important.
Was there much resistance to these ideas that you were bringing to the other country offices? Because they were all really established names in their own right who just knew they needed to be part of a bigger unit to have more impact in the market, didn't they?
Not real challenges. I mean, people obviously question why, well, this way is working for us now. Why do we want to do something differently? So it's just like anything, you start sort of trying to understand what their process is, how it is working, are the ways that we could sort of, are the problems that you've got now that we could address with something like, a more agile way of working? Because still, some people were a bit waterfall. There was a lot of things that were being done up front.
Interesting.
And then just sort of gradually making the company more agile. It's getting into that more that sort of agile mindset. And yeah, eventually, I mean, all the countries I would say probably operated that they had there were kind of country nuances, if you like, because it was always going to be like that. But yeah, I think on the whole, we ended up as quite an agile organisation. And, in the UK, we had people coming in from a number of different countries and just kind of slotted in and worked quite well with us.
Interesting. One extra dimension, I think, as well, is trying to understand where teams are. There's a book that you and I both have read recently and both love, which has a mantra in it: "Think slow, act fast." Bent Fleabag is the author, known for his mega projects, nuclear power station kind of size, physical world projects. But he has this mantra of think slow, act fast, which is not anti-agile. It's really about saying you need to understand what you're doing before you do it. And agile, certainly the way that the government work that you and I have done a lot of, thinks about it. You do the discovery work, build a prototype, build an alpha, to experiment, to understand what's the tough stuff and how you're going to solve it. Do all that sort of stuff before you're spending big money. What I'm often looking at is people who've taken that mantra, think slow, act fast, and flipped it around, and they're thinking fast because they're so eager to get on with stuff or show action and activity, and then end up acting slow because they have really no idea what it is they're building. They're not thinking it through. Yeah.
People just get a bit overexcited, don't they, at times, to think, okay, I think I know what this is. Just leave it with us. Oh, they've just gone off on their own without mentioning anything to anybody, and before you know it, they've wasted half a day or a day, achieving absolutely nothing because they had no plan. Pretty much nothing behind them. But yeah, I mean, just spending a little bit of time thinking about what you're going to do, talking it through with a couple of people as well, getting them to challenge your thinking, can make all the difference. You just, you add a lot of value just by, like you say, thinking a little bit slower.
Yeah. So I think what we've covered here is already is things like, understanding what those fundamental needs are and what the problems are, what the objectives, like you said, talking to the CEO, you said at the beginning, talking to the CEO and really trying to understand what we're trying to achieve. Out of that, if it's possible in the first 30 days, I think it's quite good to try and get ideas generated or to hear from those ground level conversations with people who've really experienced stuff. Or how would you like to solve this? What's your thoughts about this?
Yeah.
How can we get those ideas and see if you can, I mean, maybe inferred from things they say rather than actually explicitly asked, but trying to generate a bunch of ideas of how to address things. And then we're getting towards your pet subject, Steve, of identifying the risks and then getting the metrics. I know that you love having specific things to say. These are the key things that matter, so that when it comes to building metrics into stuff in later on, but I think in that 30 days you can work out, well, what are the things that are worth measuring and understanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then of course from that is some sort of plan. Now I think that's probably a good place to pause for now. So let's put a pin in it for a moment, and then when we come back after the break, we'll talk more about practicalities, about things that we've actually done in practice, those tips and tricks and methodologies and some things that kind of put flesh on the bones, so that the things that we've just been talking about, which are in our heads as we're working through this, what does that actually look like in reality? So let's pause for now. So it'd be good to start talking about some more of the practical things that we've done. And I know you've done some very specific practical things that we've talked about a bit in planning. And I'd love to hear about some of them from you, because you've got a great way of articulating them.
Yeah, so now we've talked about the baseline assessment. So obviously, when you know, as part of your first 30 days, it's about looking at that landscape. And the baseline assessment really is just about, for me, it's about mapping out the current processes. So you kind of start to just draw these things out. So you're looking at the current processes, you look at the systems, you're looking at the workflows. You are looking at dependencies, and you're trying to identify potential risks. You know, and I would expect to do this with all of the different teams, all the different stakeholders as well, because, you know, everyone is involved at some point. It's not just about the delivery teams.
So how have you actually gone about doing some of those things? Maybe take
with our old school. Generally,
really,
it's where I can, I'll do it in a room with people, with paper, pens, post-it notes, big reams of paper along the walls, and actually literally just sort of drawing out, okay, I don't know, this team, delivery team, say we get a brief from sales or from the project management team. This is what we get given. This is the information we get given. This is what we then turn that into, and these are the tools that we use to kind of to manage the workflow from end to end, from design through to delivery, and exactly what that looks like, where all the interactions are, where the different systems are, where we've got perhaps third-party systems as well, you know, where our systems sort of integrate with external systems, and really just understand how, you know, how is that working at the moment from end to end, and what could be improved as well. You know, people will be very quick to tell you what needs to be improved, what needs to be fixed. And then from that, you know, it might be that the brief that's coming in is incomplete, or sometimes it's incomplete. So why is it incomplete? Where's that brief coming from? You go and then talk to that team. That team will probably then have its own set of processes, procedures, and problems as well. And they'll interact with another team. So you then go back and you talk to that sort of team previous to them as well. And then before you know it, you've got like an end-to-end process from a sale being made through to delivery, and then usually beyond delivery as well. You might have a customer service team, you might have a service delivery team that's sort of looking after kind of day-to-day management of a tool, of a process, of a service, whatever it happens to be. And
so you're kind of talking there
all
about
these things together.
And you're kind of talking there about almost like having wallpaper paper, backing paper, and using that as a giant rollout thing. That's what I'm picturing as you're describing it, and putting post-it notes on there and drawing lines between
exactly
them.
That. And you can do this online as well. You know, we're becoming a lot more familiar with
tools like Miro or whatever,
you sort of
emulate that.
Yeah, and you can map it out. It's just whatever I do, I normally think of it in sort of I don't think of it as kind of physical process that we'll go through, but yeah, you can do it online as well. But yeah, you are just, I mean, now in the first 30 days, I will say that, you know, you're not going into all the detail at this point. You know, we are just sort of mapping out at a fairly high level, because some of these processes go into a lot of detail, and we can get into that later. But to begin with, I just want a clear understanding of what that landscape looks like, who's involved, who's making decisions, where the handoffs are, understanding where decisions are being made, and then that is what I'd like to complete by the end of my 30 days. That's what you're looking for. That would be one of my. It's kind of a success metric, if you like, to get to that point by the end of 30 days.
So what you're looking for in doing that is, if I'm playing it back to you to make sure I've got it, is the people involved, the kind of transition points where it moves from this person's responsibility to that person's responsibility.
Yeah.
Any contingencies or dependencies at that transition, like this needs to go with that. Who's making the decision about moving it across, and then how it progresses. Is that right? Have I got that roughly right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's how that bit of work goes from there, from the beginning to the end, and what's all
Mm,
the kind of interactions in between. So I think from
mm,
that is your kind of operational baseline documented, and I think
mm.
what works in parallel with that as well as a like a stakeholder map, and you can almost have
Oh,
points
interesting.
along that reference there where stakeholders are involved. Often, I find when there's problems within teams, it's sometimes because stakeholders are a bit too involved. You got to it that's a challenge for later on, actually taking stakeholders out. But obviously there's a need to get stakeholders involved, but it's just making sure that people are involved at the right places
Mm,
along the way, and they're not just sort of causing disruption.
mm.
So yeah, so I think that for me, if I get to 30 days and I've got that, I'm feel like I'm in a pretty happy place.
Yeah. I've sometimes done, or more often than sometimes, done stakeholder maps as an actual map, a physical diagram, almost like a chart, I suppose, really, of
Right?
charting. Um, uh, there's three dimensions that I always think about. Who needs to be informed that something's going on? It just needs to be told about it. Who actually decides about something going on? And then the third one is about who holds budget that can determine what goes on. Those three
Yeah.
things are like three ways of plotting where someone fits into that stakeholder map in order to understand when trying to achieve something. This person has this effect on the progress, whereas that person has that effect. I need sign off from this person for something at this kind of scale or with this kind of impact, but not from that person. This person doesn't need to know about the day-to-day stuff. They just want to know, on a month-to-month kind of scale or whatever it
That
might be in between.
that's a good point actually, because understanding what a certain stakeholder needs, it might be that they're not getting what they need, then they're getting themselves too involved in the day-to-day stuff that they don't need to be involved in. So I think understanding what their needs are, you can quite easily take them out, provided you're going to communicate what they need in another way. It might just be
Yeah,
that you sort of take that away from the team, take that disruption
yeah.
away, and it's, you're starting already to focus on maybe making some efficiencies.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? What does the stakeholder need? Because that can be part of effective stakeholder management is making sure that they are getting that stuff consistently. It's
Yeah.
allied to something we've talked about several times before, and I know you and I both do quite naturally, but it's part of that building relationships thing. Is not only
Mm.
knowing who the stakeholders are, but building a strong working relationship with them so that you can validate what they get at the moment or what impact they have at the moment and how you can improve that. Oh, I thought of another dimension that's in the stakeholder map is also who's affected by the thing. So if we make a
Yeah.
change here, what cascading effect does it have down through the pile? So if we change something here, does it affect the legal department, or does it affect invoicing if we alter the way this thing might happen? So there's a kind of, or does it affect someone's day to day if they have to go through this process of testing or authenticating the testing is completed before they can carry on. It's all that kind of who's affected by changes we make or things that we do. Yeah, yeah. So talking about building relationships, that's definitely a huge part of it. Is using that as a chance to go and meet the key people and having conversations with them, discussing what they need and don't need, and whether they can things that we do that can streamline their day to day or their week to week, or knowing that they have a regular monthly meetup with a particular high level project team for larger project work.
Yeah, and a lot of this you're achieving. You don't have to have too many meetings at the beginning, and this 30
Mm.
days is going to go over pretty quick. The meet that you have with stakeholders one, two, and three is about sort of introducing yourself. Then they introduce themselves to you. Then you start talking about their involvement, their expectations, and use that as the mapping session as well. It doesn't take. It's just taking you're only having to take a few notes, and then you're then going to plot that onto your onto your bigger stakeholder and operational map. Yeah, you don't have to sort of overwork this, overthink it at all. It can be quite simple, really.
Yeah. How much are you looking towards kind of detailed things like reviewing task boards, reviewing burn down charts for velocity tracking, things like documentation for processes or technical debt or things like that. Are you paying much attention at this
Ah,
stage?
not at this stage. Now, what I want to do is I want to understand sort of the KPIs that people have, the different teams have got as well. Um, I'll probably find out how the tools that they use to kind of manage the
Hmm.
workflow and so on. But yeah, I'll not get as involved in. I'll not go down to that level probably
Hmm.
until the next phase, the next 100 days or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds like that's the basis of our next episode, isn't it? The next 100 days. The first 100 days is how do you
Yeah,
take this stuff and put it in
that's the
practice?
big one, the 100 days.
Yeah,
This is a nice and easy sort of nice easy introduction to the company. The 30 days, you're just there asking the daft questions, and
yeah,
you're providing a shoulder to cry on for some people as well. But yeah, then the 100 days, that's when it gets things start getting a bit serious.
yeah. So which we'll pick up in due course. Um, one thing that you spoke about when we were planning, it would be nice just to pick up a little bit here is that you're very conscious that you're not wanting to change stuff in this first 30 days. You don't want to go in all guns blazing, but also at the same time as that, so that is the kind of the overriding mantra. You're also looking, well, are there some quick wins? You were saying,
Yeah, I think you don't. I think don't expect to have a big impact early on because you need to understand the consequences of the decisions that you're going to make. However, if there's some low-hanging fruit, if there's something which, it could be something as simple as somebody needs a tool to go and do a job, that would make their job that much easier. It would allow certain things to happen. You know, if you can work out that, the consequences are not far reaching and you understand what the impact's going to be, if you can get some early wins in, it sort of helps to build your reputation and you gain a little bit of trust from people as well. I think go for it, but
yeah,
you need to sort of assess what that change is that you're making.
yeah, yeah. If it genuinely is a win and can be quick, then definitely do it. And if not,
Yeah,
leave it well alone because when you know so little, it can do a lot of damage, eh?
yeah. I've known people sort of, we don't need to capture that information anymore, so we're going to take it off the form, and then before you know it, you've got the legal team or the BI team are saying, "What happened to that data that we'll always get through that we need for these exec reports?" And
Yeah,
yeah, that was something that someone just didn't see. Just seemed like a really simple change, but without sort of involving the right people, they've made
yeah,
a decision that they've then got to go and undo, and they've lost a bit of confidence in some of the people around them.
yeah, yeah. So if we round this out by saying we've got to the end of our of day 30, what have we got in our hands then? I think that's probably a kind of a useful place to get to, isn't it? So one thing I definitely really resonate with having in the hands is that stakeholder map. I really like understanding how the organization works, who's making decisions, who needs to be informed about stuff, who's affected by stuff, who holds budget and stuff, how decisions get made and how they get implemented. That's for me is that what that stakeholder map is. I know that
Yeah,
I really want to get that. That's definitely one for me. And you've just been talking about this baseline assessment or the operating baseline. You presumably like to have that in some sort of document, do you? Not just
yeah. I mean,
on Miro or on a piece of
yeah, I would boil it down to something that I'm going to put in front of like the CEO. So whoever I'm reporting to, they're normally pretty high up the chain. They're not interested in all the details. I just want to give them the confidence that I know enough about the operational landscape to give I want them to have the confidence that I've understood enough about what's going on to then be able to progress to the next phase of my understanding.
Yeah. So that sounds like
I
something
think
like a slide deck, really, to capture all that
it
sort
would
of
be,
thing.
yeah, a slide deck just to kind of talk, something I could just talk through. I wouldn't be giving them the reams of wallpaper that have been drawn on or the big Miro boards or whatever. It's just a kind of a boiled down version. I would usually they understand already what the problems are that what the various teams are experiencing, and I think just being able to play that back just helps them understand that you have sort of you've had the conversations with the right people, you've taken the feedback on board, and you've understood it.
What you're really doing is showing your analysis of it that your analysis also aligns with their expectation or their
Yeah,
planning for the business.
yeah, exactly right. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So I think in that slide deck, to kind of boil this all down, what you're trying to get is a high level summary of the situation. This is where we're at, and this is where we're aiming for. You've also should have identified the strengths of the organization and its potential weaknesses. And then, of course, it sounds like a SWOT analysis, doesn't it? But we're also looking at opportunities and risks. These are the things where we can do stuff. This is what I would really like to do in the period ahead, which we'll talk about in the next episode. And these are the
yeah,
big risks. These are the things I can see are big problems or gaps in knowledge or capability or organizational patterns of behavior that are working against us or whatever it might be. These are the risks that we're going to have to overcome. Or this is what's happening in the market at large, or the lack of client throughput or whatever. And
yeah,
then summarizing that all into some sort of plan. This is what I expect to do to go forward with this. This is the changes I'm wanting to make, but quite
yeah.
condensed. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. It's your understanding of the priorities versus their understand the priorities, and hopefully they're going to be aligned. You can have a conversation at this point and agree which of those are the highest priority, and that's what you're then going to take into the next however long that phase is going to be. But yeah, that's what you're going to be picking up on Monday, if you like, when you come back in.
Yeah, day 31. Yeah.
I think the last thing for me really is you're looking for positive feedback from the leadership on your initial approach as well.
Yes.
That's sort of hopefully that's how this conversation is going to be wrapped up.
Yeah, you're looking for a green light at the end to progress or proceed. Yeah.
You're expecting, there's a lot of trust needed here, isn't there? You're expecting them eventually to be handing over the reins. And they might be a little bit tentative.
Yeah.
So it's about, how can I give them the confidence that they can start to hand things over?
Yeah. Nice one. Another top conversation, Steve. Really appreciate that. It was really good. To try and summarize it then, let's see if we can try and summarize it. So we had this analogy at the beginning of being a mechanic on a rally car that's driving crazily on a forest road, and that feels like what it's like. You're trying to do maintenance on something that's moving at the same time, and you're trying to do assessment and keep things roadworthy at the same time, and it feels like those two things are at loggerheads. We talked in the first half about the high level things going on in our minds as CDOs, that what we're really asking is what the heck is happening? How do you actually get under that? Yes, exactly. How do I get underneath the surface? How do we get beyond the veneer to understand the detail underneath? Where are the problems? Do people even understand that they are problems? Do they even understand what the problems are in the first place? And then about who's making decisions, who holds power, who holds the reins, how decisions get made, what's driving them, and so on. Talking about some of the details that we've got in mind as we're looking at that, what the actual toolkits that people are using, how do their practices and processes work, what's their governance methodologies, have they got their heads on wrong and thinking fast and acting slow as a consequence because they haven't done enough planning and preparation. Have you got even simple things like 1,000 suppliers we're trying to coordinate, and it's all a very complicated landscape. Then in the second half we talked much more about some details about things we actually do practically, and toolkits that we use, names for things that are probably a bit more useful than what the heck's going on, like baseline assessments and stakeholder maps and so on.
Yeah, I think that's a good wrap up.
And then essentially we get into that green light at the end, again, alignment with the CEO.
Fingers crossed,
nice. Fingers crossed. Nice one. Excellent. So, as usual, you can find out more about the whole podcast at deliverthatpodcast.com. There you can ask us questions, send in thoughts and opinions. It'd be great to hear from you. And when we come back next time, we'll pick up the baton from this one, and I think we'll talk about the first 100 days when the rubber really hits the road. Nice one, Steve. Thanks for your time.
Okay, cheers, Joe.
Talk to you soon. Bye.